What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danelle Hallan, and I am back with another true crime video. And as always, if you would rather enjoy this in podcast form, you can go ahead and check out Crime Bit with Danelle Hallan anywhere that you like to enjoy your podcast, and I'll be there waiting for you. Now, today we are talking about an incredibly recent case. We're going to look into the tragic case of Emily Pike, a name you guys might recognize. She's a 14-year-old Indigenous girl that just went missing at the end of January, and she's recently been found brutally murdered. I have been watching this case since right around the time she went missing, maybe a couple weeks after, and when the details finally started to unfold, I knew that I had to get this video out to you guys because there is a deranged killer out there that did the absolute unimaginable to this little girl, and someone out there might have answers. They might have seen something that could be helpful. This case is currently in a critical time period, and we need to do all we can to raise awareness, not just for Emily Pike, but also for just the Indigenous population in general. With MMIW cases, it feels impossible to get people to care about them or talk about them. I've noticed a pattern in my videos alone. When it's an MMIW case, the numbers just do not get there at all. And without people highlighting them and talking about the problems that are happening, it never really leads to change, at least not in the way and with the quickness that it should. But right now, with Emily Pike's case circulating in the media, I have seen more public outcry from all over, and not just by the Indigenous groups that face this and fight against this on a daily basis, but people from all walks of life, from all over the country. Emily's case in particular highlights so many systemic failures that go on to endanger the Indigenous population. Murder should not be the third leading cause of death for Indigenous women and children, especially not a 14-year-old little girl. Something here has got to give, and we've got to keep this conversation going. So with that being said, let's get into all of the details. Emily was born on May 16th, 2010 into the San Carlos Apache Tribe of Arizona. And because I can't help but drop some statistics to help you guys understand the problem, Arizona is ranked third in the nation for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Now, from a very young age, she was known for her joyful spirit, her kind heart, infectious laughter. Those that knew her described her as happy, loving, and she was wonderfully quirky. She loved the color pink. She had a big passion for art. She loved playing Roblox and was an avid fan of K-pop. Emily was just your typical fun-loving, sweet little girl. According to her family, she performed really well in school, and she was excited about the idea of college in the future and a life that would allow her to explore every passion that she held close. And more specifically, she hoped to one day become a veterinarian. As her aunt Alyssa Docella said, quote, her hobbies were horizonless. She wanted so much more for herself. But unfortunately, that chance was robbed from her by some sick monster out there that's breathing air with us at the moment and deserves to be locked away forever. Now, before I get into the next bit of information leading up to her disappearance, I do want to let you guys know that being a recent case, details are still slowly flowing out. And so just go into this aware that things will likely be vague. Things will change. Things have probably changed since I sat down to film this. That's just kind of the name of the game with this. So have some patience and understanding. And as always, continue your own research from here. Now, for reasons that remain unclear, Emily at some point was moved from the reservation to a group home in Mesa, Arizona, located about 3 hours away from her tribal community. Now, some reports state that she had been in the custody of tribal social services at the time, again, for reasons unknown, and this relocation was arranged through them, possibly to provide her with better mental health resources than what was available on the reservation. It's also not really clear how long she had been there prior to her disappearance, but I have seen it kind of loosely stated in a handful of places that she had gone for a couple of times for like very short periods since 2023, but I have no real way of confirming that. But despite the distance, Emily made every effort to stay in touch with her family, and just prior to her disappearance, she'd actually spoken to two of her closest cousins. They affectionately called themselves the Trio, and Emily told them that she would be back on the reservation within a month, and they made plans to spend spend time together, to go shopping. They were excited to be reunited, but those plans would unfortunately never happen. And this brings us to January 27th, 2025. That evening, the group home in Mesa hosted visitors from a local church group. And this influx of visitors created a distraction that enabled Emily to slip away unnoticed. She was last seen walking near the intersection of Mesa Drive and McKellips Road at approximately 7:45 p.m. Now, I don't know if they know this because a witness actually saw her, or if they got that from surveillance footage. But regardless, this apparently was not very far away from the group home, and it's kind of along a main road. There's just a few blocks at this point until she would be in the middle of a highway running through town. Now, it wasn't until later that night when her absence was noted, and the house manager of the group home reported Emily as missing. And right away, authorities classified her disappearance as a runaway. It's important to note that Emily had a documented history of running away from the group home, having left the facility 3 or 4 previous occasions. This history obviously influenced the initial investigation approach because it seems like they genuinely believed Emily would just make her way back to the home as she always had. So while they did seem to look for her, I just don't think that the urgency was there. Within hours of Emily being reported as missing, officers from the Mesa Police Department were mobilized. Emily's photo started to circulate on social media. Her information was entered into state and national missing persons databases. Flyers were printed and distributed throughout the neighborhood in hopes that someone saw her walk off and what direction she headed. Because again, this was kind of like a main road running through town. There were gas stations, restaurants. Someone out there had to see something. Officers also canvassed the area around the group home and, along with staff members, attempted to retrace her steps from that night. But it's not really clear if any tips ended up coming in that led them in any sort of helpful direction. Now, for several days, the investigation proceeded under the same assumption that Emily's previous runaway behavior meant she would eventually return home safely. However, as time passed without any confirmed sightings, community concern grew because regardless of this girl's past, she was still just 14 years old and she could potentially be in danger. She can't fully care for herself. It doesn't seem like she likely had any money. I have no clue if she had a phone, and she was 3 hours away from home. I don't even know how familiar she is with this location, if she had any relatives there or friends there outside of the group home. So it's possible that she walked out into Mesa completely on her own. And when you have runaways that are in that kind of situation, usually they end up coming back because they run out of resources. They realize that maybe it wasn't the best decision to kind of run off and they want to come back home. Or sometimes they have someone that's helping them. So maybe that can play a part in this case. But one of the most devastating revelations was the delay in notifying Emily's family. This is just one of those cases where every time a detail comes out and you're like, there's no way it can get worse than this, it absolutely ends up getting worse than that. So under Arizona law, when a child that's in state custody goes missing, authorities are required to notify the family within 1 day. However, it's been reported that Emily was under the care of the San Carlos Apache Tribal Social Services, so not technically state custody, meaning that this requirement didn't necessarily apply. So communication subsequently fell through the cracks. So rather than immediately alerting her family, local authorities relied on the group home to contact Emily's case manager, who would then relay the information to her family. Authorities said to local news outlets that this was just typical protocol in the situation, seemingly kind of like brushing the responsibility off their shoulders. And so ultimately, it wasn't until a whole week had passed, that her case manager finally reached out to her mom to say, hey, Emily's been missing for a week now. We have no idea where she is. And I just, again, can't understand this because protocol or not, how did police even start an investigation into a missing child and continue it for a week without speaking directly to her family? Like one of the immediate theories that would pop into, I feel like, most people's minds is maybe she went back home. Like, we got to reach out to her family. At this point, it just feels like blatant avoidance. As you can probably imagine, this left her family in a state of agonizing uncertainty. A whole week had passed that they could have been searching, raising awareness, but due to no fault of their own, the most crucial time had slipped past them. In so many of my MMIW videos, I directly speak on inconsistent protocols, lack of interdepartment communications, and I just feel like this case perfectly highlights the urgent need for clearer and more consistent protocols across all agencies to ensure that things like this don't happen, that families and victims aren't left in the dark. It's a huge problem. And so after learning that Emily was missing, her family immediately began to fight for answers. They were now scrambling to fill the gap due to lost time. They started to reach out to local law enforcement, contacting tribal services, and utilizing every available channel to spread the word about Emily's disappearance. Family members and community members on the reservation started to also share information on social media. They were putting up flyers, again, hoping that someone might have seen something. However, they were kind of limited in their reach and frustrated by the late start to their efforts. They were 3 hours away from where she was last known to be. And so as weeks passed without any sign of Emily, the possibility that she was not simply a runaway, as initially assumed, became more prominent. And then the investigation took a dramatic turn when a leaked memo from the Gila County Sheriff's Office 80 miles away from Mesa appeared on their official Facebook page. And this is another one of those moments where it gets worse. This memo was clearly intended for internal use only, and it shocked the entire community. And I just want to give you a warning right now that this is very graphic information. This memo revealed insanely graphic details about dismembered remains that had been discovered on February 14th, 2025, off of Highway 60 near milepost 277. This is a desolate area in the mountains of Arizona, about an hour and a half from the larger cities of Phoenix and Tucson, and the last place that Emily was seen. There are a handful of smaller towns kind of scattered along the highway, but this stretch is barren. The information disclosed that human remains were found in multiple contractor bags, with one bag containing what appeared to be a head and a torso, and the other bag holding legs. And it went on to say that several body parts, including hands and arms, were missing. And even more devastating, the memo hinted that these dismembered remains could potentially belong to 14-year-old Emily Pike. The community was outraged. Family members, local advocates, residents took to social media with hashtags like Justice for Emily Pike rapidly trending as people started to demand immediate accountability. It was evident that this memo was not supposed to reach public eyes. There were photos, you guys, of where the remains were found. Anyone could find that location and disturb evidence and destroy this entire scene. Clearly, this was a homicide, and this could have tipped off whoever was involved. And also, how on earth had this been going on for weeks and the public didn't know anything about it? Everyone was understandably infuriated that this situation compromised the integrity of the investigation. It highlighted a clear lack of strict protocols, which is already an issue that was abundant in this case, and deepened the emotional trauma experienced by not just Emily's family, but the Indigenous community as a whole. This was the way that Emily's family found out about the horrific details of her possible murder, after already being traumatized by the delay in finding out that she was missing in the first place. Now, in response to this leak, authorities obviously had no choice but to now acknowledge the discovery. And so on February 26, 2025, the Gila County Sheriff's Office issued a formal statement describing the remains as those of an unidentified female. They confirmed that a thorough forensic analysis was underway and explained that further investigative efforts had been needed to identify the remains, which I guess was their explanation as to why they had not released information up until this point. But in their statement, they also mentioned that they were working closely with the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police, which just solidified their belief that the remains potentially belonged to Emily. Then the following day, February 27th, another statement confirmed everyone's worst fears. It had been Emily. And this was now an active homicide investigation. Gila County went into a little bit more detail on how exactly the remains had been found. Authorities said they received a call on Valentine's Day from a group of hikers in the area off of Highway 60. And I guess at some point during their hike, they noticed several black trash bags, and they went over to take a look, and upon further inspection, believed that they contained human remains. So they immediately alerted authorities. Now, it's not clear exactly how authorities connected the remains to Emily, but it has been stated that it took poring over dozens of Arizona missing persons cases to finally get the answers. But the only question that I have in my mind over and over and over again, how did this 14-year-old girl end up 80 miles away, dismembered in trash bags?
The girl's family tells us she went missing from a group home in Mesa at the end of January. Now they're trying to help detectives find her killer. True crime correspondent Brianna Whitney's here tonight. You spoke with her mother today. Boy, that's a tough conversation to have.
It was, maybe even worse than usual just because of how grotesque this crime is. It is horrible. The teenager's name is Emily Pike, 14 years old. Her mother told me she got the news just yesterday. She wants to know what happened between the time Emily disappeared at the end of January and Valentine's Day, when her remains were discovered in trash bags on the side of a dirt road.
I wanted to say that I miss you so much, and I really hope I'll try to see if he can come visit me next time.
Young teenage innocence. It's everything 14-year-old Emily Pike embodied to her family and friends.
My daughter, she was a very happy and kind person. She loves painting, she loves art, she loves to draw.
Emily's mother, Steph Dosella, tells me over the phone her daughter was hoping to go to college and pursue her love of art. That all changed in late January.
Her case manager finally came a week later to tell me that she was missing.
Emily's family lives on the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation and tells me at the time Emily was living in a group home in Mesa. According to the Mesa Police Department, Emily was last seen alive on January 27th near Mesa Drive and McKellips Road, and the group home manager reported her missing. This week, the Gila County Sheriff's Office said they found dismembered remains on February 14th in a wooded area off Highway 60 past Globe. According to detectives, Emily's torso and head were in large contractor trash bags, with her legs in another. They have not been able to find her arms and hands. The autopsy showed she had visible face and head trauma.
Why did it go that far? But she's just an innocent, she was a baby. Pain that I would hope no other mother goes through.
Whoever was behind this is one wildly sick individual. This confirmation only intensified the anger and the sorrow that was felt by Emily's family and the community. The brutality of her murder, the obvious efforts to conceal their crime, and the disposal of her remains was something that nobody could wrap their heads around. Who does something like that? And in the wake of such a violent and disturbing crime, many residents, understandably so, began to question their own safety, particularly in the remote areas where the remains were discovered. Local community members expressed a deep concern that if someone was capable of committing such brutality against a 14-year-old child, the overall safety of the community might be at risk. Like, clearly they draw a line nowhere. People also worried that this did not seem like the actions of a first-time killer, raising fears that, hey, is there potentially a serial killer at large? Gila County authorities attempted to reassure residents by stating that while the crime was heinous, there so far was no evidence to suggest that there was a serial killer on the loose, and they emphasized that based on current investigations, the incident appeared to be isolated. But not many people seem to be buying that, and I am honestly right there with them. Thanks to public outcry, the investigation into Emily's murder accelerated dramatically with this information now being out in the public, and it involves multiple agencies. The Gila County Sheriff's Office is leading the investigation since her remains were found within their jurisdiction. At the same time, the FBI and the Bureau of Indian Affairs have stepped in to provide additional support, while the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police continue to actively participate due to Emily's tribal membership. I was honestly shocked hearing this information because typically you can't get a single jurisdiction to even take claim over any MMIW case, let alone all of them willing to work together. So to see all of that happening is bringing me a ton of hope because in my opinion, this is going to be a really challenging case. And I think they're going to need every single resource they can get. Now, shortly after the remains were found, searches were conducted in the remote areas that were surrounding on Highway 60. Authorities were aiming at finding evidence that could link to the person responsible, as well as locate the rest of Emily's remains, because so far, they're still nowhere to be found. And at this point, no one can really be sure whether her arms and hands were disposed of elsewhere as a means of concealment, if animals played a role, or if something entirely different happened. And I have my own personal thoughts on this. The autopsy showed that someone horribly assaulted Emily before death, which makes it highly possible that she fought back in a bid to save her own life. And it's not lost on me, given that information, that the body parts missing all play an active part when it comes in defending yourself and fighting someone, and more importantly, identifying the perpetrator. DNA under fingernails is a huge way authorities solve cases. And in my opinion, it's clear that someone went to extreme lengths to hide this crime, to cover their tracks, so it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibilities that they might have considered that aspect as well, and put even more effort into the concealment of those body parts, especially because, for what my unprofessional opinion is worth, I agree that this doesn't look like someone's first time spur of the moment murder, or, a very convenient crime of opportunity in the usual sense. And I'll get deeper into that a little later in the video. Investigators have expanded their focus beyond the immediate area of the group home to include highways and remote areas all between Mesa and Gila County, because there's 80 miles where something could have possibly happened. Authorities have stated they can't say for sure where exactly Emily was murdered. There's another crime scene somewhere that they have to find. They've also been meticulously reviewing surveillance footage and analyzing digital records, all in an effort to trace Emily's final movements. But again, I'm not sure what all they have. I don't know what electronics she had access to, if she had been carrying a phone at the time. I feel like if she had, it would have been mentioned somewhere, so it makes me worry that there's going to be no way to trace her other than surveillance footage, which they did obtain surveillance footage from the area around the group home, but again, it's not clear if they found any useful information on it. And when it comes to the area where her body was disposed of, authorities are heavily relying on tips because this area is isolated.
How often are you guys getting tips and leads at this point?
Our detectives are getting calls almost around the clock.
Lieutenant Jim Lottie is with the Gila County Sheriff's Office, the lead agency investigating the murder of 14-year-old Emily Pike.
When you take into account the way in which Emily's remains were recovered and found, how does that impact your investigation?
It doesn't change how we investigate. It is definitely, in this particular case, I would use the description of a special kind of evil. There was some surveillance footage that the detectives are looking into.
What about the area where her remains were found?
In that area, that's such a rural area. There's like no housing, there's no businesses, it's just, forests.
Unless someone just so happened to pass by and notice something unusual, whatever occurred there may remain a secret. Authorities are keeping any information that they are getting quiet, which I'm assuming is likely due to their oversharing with the leak, and also just naturally due to the nature of a fresh case. They don't want to further compromise it. But there are also some inconsistencies that have been frustrating for the public, and I'm sure the family as well. Emily's mom spoke to the media not too long ago, and when she did, she said authorities specifically told her they have 3 people they are looking into as potentially being either suspects or persons of interest. So that information caused a bit of a media frenzy. I mean, people want to know, okay, who are they? Are they actually close to capturing who would do something like this? But around the same time she released that information, authorities stated and continue to state that they don't have any persons of interest or suspects. So at this point, who knows what's actually happening? Emily's mom, however, wasn't the only one to come forward with some information that no one had heard before.
The story hits hardest for those who lived with Emily in the Mesa group home, like her roommate, who we're calling Chelsea to protect her identity.
My relationship with Emily was just like trying to steer her in the right direction because it's hard being in the group home.
Chelsea says she lived at the group home near Mesa Drive in McKellips for 4 years and that Emily lived there 2 different times. Emily was from the San Carlos Apache Reservation, and Chelsea says she struggled with mental health and there were better resources in the valley. While Chelsea recently moved out, she's in contact with many of the girls still living there. She says Emily left the home in late January because she wanted to visit a boy she met while taking guitar lessons. Chelsea says at the time Emily left, a church group was conducting activities at the group home.
What it looked like was that the church was there and that served as a distraction of when Emily left. She left because she wanted to go out and see the boy that she liked. And she wanted to talk to him. She either used the back door, she used the window, and she left as everyone was distracted.
Chelsea says Emily had run away before. Police tell us the group home manager reported Emily missing.
My time being there, I've seen many kids run away from this group home.
Now, like I said, no statement's been made by local authorities to confirm or deny this information or to say they'd spoken to this guy or they ruled him out or he's a person of interest. So it's kind of up in the air like everything else. But it's what she said next that kind of stuck out to me the most.
Based on where Emily's remains were found off Highway 60 heading northeast, Chelsea believes she was just trying to go home.
I feel like she just ran away and she was trying to hitchhike back to her reservation to see her parents, and she just got picked up by the wrong person.
All I could think of when hearing this are the countless missing and murdered women along the Highway of Tears. Emily had spoken to her cousins just before her disappearance, claiming that she would be home within the month. Now, could that have been something that was already planned by the group home and social services? Of course, and they just haven't stated it. But because no one's confirmed that, it makes me wonder if she said that because she already had plans to come back on her own accord. Obviously, that is just speculation, but that's the next place that my mind went to. And on top of that, her remains were found at almost the halfway point between Mesa and the reservation. What are the chances in all of Arizona, all the directions someone could have gone, that whoever did this to her dumped her along the direct route home unless she had possibly hitchhiked, asking specifically to go that way, and somewhere along the ride, things went so terribly wrong. But it's not just possible that a total stranger picked her up when she was trying to hitchhike. It could have been someone that she somewhat knew. And so that makes me wonder, again, what access she had to social media. I know that she played Roblox, which is a breeding ground for groomers. So did she meet someone online? Did someone say they would meet her and take her home, but had other intentions? There are just so many possibilities that authorities are likely working to rule out. Now, luckily, communication of that kind is typically going to be easily traceable, especially with the FBI involved. So if that's the case, I'm sure they already have some sort of answers. But if she did hitchhike with a total stranger, I have other worries. You guys know that if I am saying this because I am not one that likes to theorize outside of like what authorities are actively saying, that I genuinely am so concerned that this is a possibility. I have such an awful pit in my stomach about a potential serial killer out that way. And yes, I know authorities said so far they have no evidence to suggest that. But if you really sit and think about it, obviously crimes of opportunity do happen. However, how likely is it that the person also has the tools, the knowledge, and the experience to do what was done to Emily? Things like that is brutal. I mean, that is something that you have to kind of understand what you're doing to do, which means you've very likely done it before. And her injuries, according to the autopsy, it seems like there was anger or hatred or some serious emotion behind it. And a lot of serial killers do have this reasoning behind their actions, like their mother didn't treat them properly. They have a hatred for women. They have a hatred for sex workers. They have a hatred for, a certain race. There's usually something like that behind it. And there's just screaming red flags to me when it comes to this being a possibility in Emily's case. It's really hard to imagine that someone with no history of violent crime conveniently is in the right place at the right time to pick up Emily, has all the tools necessary to horribly, brutally murder her and dismember her body, bags, like the whole 9 yards, and the knowledge to go to this specific location to dump remains. Like, I struggle with it so much. I will genuinely be shocked if the perpetrator is someone that has not done something like this before. So again, me and my unprofessional opinion that I know nobody asked for. And with that being said, I hope authorities are right. I hope this was an isolated incident and other people aren't in danger out that way, because how horrifying as a resident would it be to have to consider that each day while leaving your house? Authorities are asking anyone that traveled along Highway 60 the night of Emily's disappearance, and really all the way up until the day she was discovered, to think back. Did you see someone walking along the road that might have been Emily? Did you see someone pulled over acting strangely? They're hoping that tips can help bring them some answers. I don't know if they have even solidified a day that they believe Emily passed away. I don't know if she could have been held somewhere for a period of time, or if something happened to her that night that she walked away from the group home. There's just so many questions because this is such a new case, and authorities likely have a lot of those answers and are just not sharing them yet. And meanwhile, there are several other parallel issues that are being faced head on. Information about the group home that Emily was at started to come to light in the media over the last couple of weeks. And I've seen people the week I'm filming this really focusing on it, because reports indicate that this facility has been associated with as many as 30 missing persons incidents in just the past 3 years. Now, these statistics raise some serious questions in the public about oversight and safety protocols, because the children in these environments are already at an increased risk. I've seen several different comments and kind of perspectives on this information. Now, obviously, with these kids being at a higher risk already, it's possible that this number isn't any higher than what is typically seen across the board. And that's not to say that 30 missing persons cases isn't a huge deal, because it is. But it might just be the average, since these kids tend to be struggling, they lack support, they've been taken from their homes, they've experienced a lot of trauma. I'm just simply suggesting that this might not be an anomaly indicating something is up with this particular home. We just don't have the information to really make that determination. It's also been stated that several of these 30 are habitual runaways. I mean, 4 of them were Emily alone, so it could be so high because these same 3 or 4 kids just keep running off repeatedly. It's just a really complicated situation, but for the people that have really been concerned over this specific group home due to this information, it was just released that DCS has opened a licensing inquiry to make sure that the appropriate steps were taken. So there is an investigation going on. They are looking into that group home just to be sure. So hopefully that helps to put people's minds at ease. It's just really hard talking about these group homes and children that are in the custody of the state or social services, because they're understaffed, underpaid, like the whole spiel that you hear everybody say. It's true. And there's also limitations on them. But I don't think that means there aren't several ways that things could be changed to help protect these children. Because in Emily's case, the assumption that she would return based on her past behavior led to a slower, less aggressive search during those first critical days. Had it been less of a possibility for her to run off to begin with, maybe this one disappearance would have been taken more seriously. There has to be a better way for investigators and these group homes to distinguish between habitual behavior and signs of a more dangerous situation. And instead, everything just kind of gets lost and the easier way is taken. And on top of that, there needs to be a faster way to inform the public and families when these children go missing, which led to something that a lot of people are currently speaking out about and trying to push. There is legislation that I spoke about in one of my more recent videos. Advocates have been long calling for an Amber Alert style system tailored specifically to Indigenous communities. This would be such a quick way to spread this information. Emily's uncle said, quote, "Maybe we would have been able to locate Emily a whole lot sooner before this happened if we had such a system." And this has been something that several states have been pushing, and thankfully the push has worked, because House Bill 2281 in regard to the alert just passed through the House, and it has been heard by the Senate, but at the point of me recording this video, I've not seen what the Senate has decided. Honestly, it's just refreshing in general to see such a quick change. But the push for change has not stopped there, and it is still going to this day, and I hope that it continues on. Following the confirmation of Emily's death, the community responded with an outpouring of grief and demands for justice, and it was not just the local community. On March 6, 2025, hundreds of people gathered in Mesa at the spot where she was last seen. Family members, friends, community advocates all held signs demanding justice and pointing out the failures that led to this tragedy. Later, on March 15th, 2025, a second vigil was held at the Apache Gold Casino, drawing support from across the country. These gatherings weren't just moments of mourning, they were calls to action and strong ones.
Because it's sad. She's like a year older than me.
Among the demonstrators at the day of action, this girl just about Emily's age. Her family knows what it feels like to lose a loved one.
A cousin who's still missing.
Like so many others at the rally.
My loved one that we lost about 7 years ago, Manny Stewart, still no answers, no justice, no peace.
This woman opening up about how she's forever changed after her partner disappeared.
It's devastating. It's devastating, and the pain is just, it has me dedicated to this walk.
With signs demanding no more lost sisters, many say Emily's tragic case highlights the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and people.
Things have not changed. Women, Native women are going missing still at alarming rates.
I have my 2 daughters right there, and it's scary to let them be outside by themselves, being away from them is scary now.
Social media campaigns using hashtags like Justice for Emily Pike, No More Stolen Sisters, and MMIW amplified the public outcry for accountability and systemic reform. I just want everyone to know that what they're doing, it's getting out there. It is getting to people. Vigils are also starting to pop up all over the country to show support, and legislators have taken notice. Emily's name in the headlines has turned into a nationwide call to action. Every failure, every gap, every delay cost a precious life, and people are so sick and tired of it.
It's hard for me. Hard for me. Imagine what happened to her.
Emily's grandmother, Agatha Key, out on Sunday, hanging yellow ribbons for Emily.
My heart is hurting. I can't handle it.
There's so much that you guys can do to help keep this conversation going, and I want to encourage you guys to do those things. Attend vigils if there's any in your area, or if you have a way of organizing a vigil, go ahead and do that too. Share Emily's photo, share her story, use the hashtags, keep them in trending so more people are drawn to this story. Emily's family's fight for justice is far from over. Whoever is evil enough to commit this crime is still out there. We have to continue showing that we will not forget that. Something like this should never happen to anyone, let alone a child, a 14-year-old little girl that had so many plans for her future. Everything from her dreams of becoming a veterinarian to just wanting to go shopping with her cousins again. I genuinely hope that every investigator involved in this case fights for this case like she is their own, because that is exactly what she deserves and no less. I am sure there will be consistent updates in this case over the upcoming weeks, so please make sure you keep an eye on my community tab on YouTube, all of my social media. It's just the fastest way for me to get information to you guys, share these updates that are being released. I have so much hope that so much can happen from this case. I have so much hope that with all of these agencies involved, they're going to find out who did this to Emily. We just have to keep that pressure on. If you have any information at all about Emily's case, I will have all of the contact information you need down below to get it into the right hands. They need surveillance footage. They need any witnesses that saw anything strange on that stretch of Highway 60. But that's all that I've got for you guys today. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Emily's story. And not just that, I want to encourage you guys from here to go and listen to all of the cases in my MMIW playlist. Go and check out other podcasts that are specific to MMIW cases, because Emily is far from the only one. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallan fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.